Well, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome, everybody. This is the next in our series for the Accelerator for Collaborative AI in higher education. Last week, we gave an introduction to collaborative generative AI. I'm going to go ahead and recap that for the folks who couldn't make it last time. And then in this class, I want to dive in more. And last time we talked about the process. This time, I want to talk more about the specific tools. And we've got a couple of practitioners on and make this more of an interactive back and forth using Boodlebox as a platform example. So I'm France Hong. I'm the founder, CEO of Bootlebox. I am also part-time a lecturer at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. So I've spent some time in a higher ed classroom, understand that this is a change, right? This is a transformation. And in discussions with staff, faculty, and administrators, there's a lot of higher education, thoughtful higher education folks asking, really, what does this mean for higher education as a whole? Because this is, in some ways, kind of causing higher education folks to rethink the value of the higher education process, and really consider, what's the goal at this point in an AI-enabled world? What kind of skills and experiences and educational outcomes do we want our students to have? So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick recap. Let me make sure I've got the share here going of last week. And hi, Eduardo. And go through this again. So let's just start off with the Boodle process, right? How to use generative AI. So we talked about a 6-step process that students and faculty alike can use in generative AI that allows you to access the AI and use it in a responsible way. And so those 6 steps were beginning with the right use cases. So not every use case is a good use case for generative AI. Generative AI has better applications in certain cases than others. Things that involve structured data are less appropriate. For example, things that involve unstructured data are more appropriate. But you want to begin with the right use cases. So as faculty members, you want to educate students on these are good use cases, more appropriate use cases for generative AI. These are less appropriate use cases. Second, you want to opt for the right model or the bot. So, different tools for different jobs. So you want to focus on those AIs that have particular strengths in the area that you're trying to solve for that, what a particular use case is. Third, there's this idea of prompt engineering, right? And so you've got the right use case, you've got the right AI. Now you want to talk to the AI the right way. And we talked last week about some of those things that go into prompt engineering. Fourth, to get really the best results from AI, you want to incorporate your existing knowledge, whether that's data, that's existing chats, that's other knowledge sources. General AIs provide general outputs. If you incorporate your proprietary data, your personal data, you're going to get personalized results. Now, obviously, there are some safety, security, privacy concerns around that, and you've got to address those. And we talked last week about some of the things you can do, but it boils down to having trust in the systems that you're using. And there are systems that allow you to use your proprietary data in a safe, secure manner. The next step is you want to leverage a human AI team. So AIs, just like humans, have certain strengths and weaknesses. If you use multiple AIs in the same conversation, that allows you to offset the strengths and weaknesses of one another. And then ultimately, as we talked about, humans are responsible for the output of the AI. And so one way, if you're concerned about hallucinations, verification, bias, by bringing other people into the conversation, you can reduce the chances of those disadvantages of AI leaking through. And then finally, and perhaps the most important step you want to teach faculty and students is evaluating the output and using it ethically and responsibly. And teaching, starting with the faculty, and then, of course, having them teach on to the students, right? What does that mean, right? How do I evaluate what I get out of the AI, and how do I use it ethically, effectively, responsibly? What we don't want is, shortcutting, right? Simply putting in a prompt, taking an output, and treating it like the end result. That's neither an effective nor is it a responsible use of AI. So, let's go and kind of review back about collaborative AI as a whole. So collaborative AI systems are systems that are designed where humans, AIs, and knowledge can all interact together. Obviously, an important part of that is the AI itself. Collaborative AI systems are like any other systems, they require AIs that are capable of generating new output. And with the advent of ChatGPT and similar large language models, we had AI that was unlike anything we had before. AI typically in the past was predictive or descriptive. They could take a data set and predict what would happen next. After A and B comes C. We have descriptive AI. It would take a large data set and pull out descriptive analytics from that for you. Or you had prescriptive AIs. Hey, based on these set of factors, I think that this part's going to fail in 100 hours. So you should do something about that. Generative AI is different. It is AI that allows you to generate new content, whether it be text or images or video. And it feels magical, right? It feels like it's creating something out of nothing. And I think that's why it's caught our imagination so quickly. The truth is these systems are actually large language models. What they're using are what are called transformers to look at the relationship between, words, clauses, sentences, and they're able to take an input, a prompt, and based on the relationship between those words, essentially generate a response, right? Transform those, predict what would make sense as a response coming out of that. And that response happens to be useful to us. And they involve large training data sets, whether it be the entire internet or all of Wikipedia or all of Reddit, that goes into these models, and then a vast amount of computing power. And so these models are very expensive to develop, very expensive to run, but the input of those, the prompt, produces this amazing output. And as we talked about last week, the value of these models is that it allows us to save time, do more, and achieve better results. So before generative AI, to go from 0 to 100, we had to do all the work ourselves, or we had to delegate that to someone, or we had to collaborate with somebody else and get to that 0 to 100. This is a new world now. When it comes to knowledge work, we can put a little bit of work in the beginning. That's the prompt. That's the 10, 15%. That gets us a 70 or 80% solution. And now we can put in the human expertise to get us to finalize that result to get to 100%. And as I shared last week, people both tend to overestimate and underestimate generative AI. And so, for example, if I were to ask generative AI to help me repair a dishwasher, I would find it amazing because I know nothing about repairing dishwashers. So I'm a 0 on the scale. 7 or 80 seems amazing to me, right? And particularly if I with a single prompt, I can get an 80% solution. However, I were to ask it a question about, let's say, constitutional law, which is something I know just a little bit about, I would look at the AI and go, well, I can see all the problems with this answer. Whereas somebody else who doesn't know anything about constitutional law, like I don't know anything about dishwashers, would find the answer amazing. So the reality is AI gets us what I would say is a B- solution. The power of it isn't that it's a 100% solution. The power is it gets us to a B- solution in a matter of seconds or minutes, allowing us to do more in the same amount of time and focus on those parts of the workflow where we can add the most value. I think we all have the experience of, if you need to write something, I'd prefer to have a draft because it's faster for me to edit than to start with a blank sheet of paper. And so, that is the value of these systems. In using the systems, though, it should be a collaboration between humans, AI, and knowledge. And so what I'd like to do now is just introduce you to some of the models that are out there and what I think are some of their strengths and weaknesses. And this will be a bit of a survey. And I would love to involve the practitioners that we have joined us today and maybe start there. Eduardo, would you mind sharing what are some of your favorite AI models and tools that you use?
Sure, there it is. I'm on mute. Well, I'm a very basic Chat GPT user, and that is the one that I use the most. That's the one I've introduced in class, and that is the one that I'd like to find how to leverage and then combine with some others.
Great. And what is it that you like about ChatGPT, or is it just the first model you use and it's sort of like the AOL effect, right? It's the first thing I use, I'm comfortable with it.
Right. It's the first thing that I've used and I'm comfortable with it. And it helped me a lot, not only in class. You see, I also design, edit, adapt transformational change curriculums for accelerators and fellowships. So we work with governments, for example, and we collaborate on promoting the social impact ecosystems, with Saudi Arabia. And so we do it with Mexico. And we design the whole curriculum. It's been incredibly helpful in what you said, getting me to that B-, because to put, these curriculums together, it requires a team effort. And it has reduced dramatically, the time that we spend gathering, putting together drafts in order to finalize the material.
Great. Thank you, Eduardo. Troy, would love to hear what AI tools you're currently using.
Yeah, I've similar to Eduardo, I've done mainly Chat GPT. I've goofed around a little bit with Play-Doh, but not enough to get a sense for it yet. I actually only did that in the context of another workshop that I was had some opportunity to explore with. And what I found it useful for is, like you were saying, avoiding that blank sheet of paper effect. I've used it to develop a start on some lesson plans, provide student guidance on particular assignments. I've asked it a lot of stupid questions just to see what it would say. And we went through a series with my students where it was an experimental block in one of the courses that I was teaching, and essentially asking them to find a problem worth solving. And they could use whatever resources at their disposal to do that, whether it's asking friends and family, experimenting with various prompts, and got some decent usage out of that. And then finally, I taught a negotiations class in the fall where we stumbled upon a AI simulator where you actually can negotiate with the simulation, which was pretty neat.
That's great. Play-Doh, is that the one that has access to academic journal articles?
Yeah, so I think there's a great use case in higher ed for that. It helps avoid some of the hallucinations that you get when you just use a general purpose LLM. So I think that has some potential. I just need to figure out how to use it better.
Yeah, so you bring up a great point, Troy. So hallucinations, right? So these models, these general models, because of the way they trained, they want to provide an answer. Like they are strongly inclined to generate a result. They don't want to say, I don't know, or I don't know anything about this. And so if there's a clear answer, great. If there's not a clear answer, then these models do have a tendency to hallucinate, right? Which is make up something that isn't true. There was a recent journal article that put out that basically said, the title of it is ChatGPT is a bullshitter. And it goes into the classic definition of what a bullshitter is, and then talks about how classic ChatGPT meets that, because it's not only that these models can hallucinate, they're very confident in doing so. They are very convincing sounding when they make up something. So again, I think part of when faculty and staff think about implementing generative AI in the classroom, it's not just a matter of turning the tool over and saying, use this. There is going to be a certain amount of training, particularly around that last step I talked about, which is how do you evaluate the output? What are the things you want to guard against? Hallucinations, bias, right? How do you verify and validate the answer coming out? And then how do you incorporate that? Because as a general rule, 70 to 80% is not a good answer. Now there are use cases where it's fine. If I'm generating ideas, then I'm going to throw out 90% of what the AI gives me anyways. That's fine, right? But if it's a work product, as a general rule, you don't want to just take the outcome, the output, and then submit it. Like, I sometimes joke, large language models are like the dumbest smart people I've ever met, right? It's like this very eager intern that has this completely naive experience. And so, we've got to train the users of it to be, as someone once said, normally you always trust and verify. With large language model, you just verify. There is no trust in the models. So ChatGPT is obviously the most well-known. There are numbered models. GPT 3.5 was the one that really kicked things off with ChatGPT. Shortly after, OpenAI released ChatGPT 4, which was the first of the GPT-4 level models, the more powerful, what people sometimes refer to as pro models. More recently, they released something called 4.0. So here we see it. ChatGPT 4.0 is the most advanced of the OpenAI models currently available. It's natively multimodal. You'll hear that term. Multimodal means it's capable of interacting with images, with voice, with outputting image and voice, and video as well, once the capabilities are released for that. So a point of clarification, we talk about these, we talk sometimes about ChatGPT and GPT 3.5 as one and the same. They're actually different. So the models themselves, the large language models, right, are engines that produce outputs based on input. So, they generate a response based on a prompt. But you got to interact with those models in some way. So ChatGPT is actually an application layer that sits on top of the models and gives you access to something like GPT 3.5 or now GPT 4.0. And so when you go into ChatGPT, you actually have the ability to select which model you're using, which large language model. And so sometimes people use those terms interchangeably. They're actually different. So GPT 4.0 is fast, it's powerful. It does pretty good at analytics. I tend to use it when I want to do an analysis, something that involves a data structure, some type of a limited data analysis. It also does really well at formatting outputs, as we'll see. And so it's a good general purpose model. Probably the two well-known peers of general models are Google's Gemini 1.5 and then Anthropic's Claude 3. So Anthropic is a company that emphasizes safety and security. They released Claude as a 3.5 level model, Claude 2. And more recently, just before the release of GPT 4.0, they released their Claude 3 model, which is their most powerful model. And that got a lot of high praise. I'm going to go ahead and bring up Claude 3 here. Claude 3 got high praise for its humanness, for its kind of nuanced analysis, understanding, and it comes in 3 flavors. There's Claude 3 Haiku, which is the fastest but most quote-unquote lightweight of the models. There's Claude 3 Opus, which was their most powerful model, but it's also the slowest. And then there's Sonnet, Claude 3 Sonnet, which is kind of a balance between the two. For a lot of people, this is their favorite, frankly, general purpose model. And there are a number of people I know who, when they want to have something generated that's text-based, they'll go to Claude 3 as an alternative to, say, ChatGPT. And so the Claude 3 family is, I think, very sophisticated in their ability to parse language. And if you're looking for a quote-unquote human-like response, Claude 3 are some of the best models out there. Gemini is the Google released model. Their 1.5 Pro was most recently released. It is probably most well known for the fact that it has a massive context window. So what do I mean when I say context window? Context window is this, it's the chat area, and context window size means how much can you put into a context window. We often measure context windows by tokens. So a token is part of a word. So, the math kind of works out to like, 3/4 of a token equals a word. or sort of a token equals 3/4 of a word. And so Gemini was famous for introducing a 1 million token size context window, which is huge, right? Like that's like War and Peace a couple of times over. And so there have been lots of examples where people put huge data sets into Gemini and analyze them. So large documents for analysis. So there's an earlier version of Gemini 1.0 as well, and I will show you that. But generally speaking, as you go up the number chain, the models get more powerful. All of these models also come with more lightweight versions. So I mentioned Claude 3 Haiku. There is like a faster version of GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. Gemini comes in a version called Gemini 1.5 Flash, which is able to handle large data sets faster. The last general model I want to talk about is the Llama 3 family. So Llama 3 comes from Meta. It is an open source model. So it's incredibly customizable, and particularly there may be a community you hear about called Hugging Face. Hugging Face is a community of large language model developers. They take models that are open source and they customize them for different purposes. Llama 3 is not the only one. There's a bunch of other well-known ones, Smog, Mistral, they all have names like this, by the way. But Llama 3 is probably the most well-known, and Llama 3, particularly the 70B version, the biggest, is the most capable. So what makes Llama 3 different than, say, OpenAI's GPT or Gemini 1.5 or Claude 3 is when you're working with those models in a platform like this, you're actually accessing through an API. So, you're putting in a prompt here and it's going through an API to the large language model and coming back. With Llama 3, because it's open source, software companies like ourselves can actually host our own model. And so we have our own controlled instance of Llama 3. And so those prompts and that data doesn't go anywhere outside of Boodlebox itself. And so for organizations that are concerned about security, proprietary data, those models that are open source are a good choice. And in fact, some companies that are really concerned about it host their own instances of open source models and use them. So I'm going to do a quick little demonstration here of the models. I'm going to go ahead and bring in GPT 4.0, and I'm going to ask it to summarize generative AI in one paragraph. So in Boodlebox, one of the things you can do is bring in multiple AIs. So here's GPT 4.0's answer. That's fine. Let's go ahead and switch. Let's bring in Claude 3. Opus, what do you think of GPT 4.0's answer? How would you answer? And so here we see Claude 3 critiquing GPT 4.0's answer and then building upon it. It's getting a little verbose. But this is very typical of Claude 3, by the way. It's thoughtful. It will generate a lot of text and a lot of nuances in its answer. Let's go ahead and bring in Gemini.
Quick question, Franz.
Yeah.
Have you experimented with telling the model itself to be thoughtful or think slowly as a way of getting deeper answers?
Yeah, there's this idea, right? Like take a deep breath and answer the questions. I think it's worth a shot. I mean, I do tend to see that it does produce a different result. Now, is it because of that prompt, or is it because these models can't actually reproduce the same result over and over? So if you were to ask it anything twice, it will produce a different result. I don't think it hurts, and I think in some cases, varying prompts just in general is a good way to experiment with the models, Troy. So how's your experience been?
Kind of like you, I can't tell if I'm getting a different response because it is really trying to be more thoughtful and piece things together, or whether it's just a different way of expressing it. So,
Yeah.
In talking with people who know a lot more about this than I do, they seem to think it's a worthwhile thing to do if you need a more creative answer, for instance. But I haven't generated enough trials to know if that actually gets me what I want.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and bring in, I'm going to go ahead and bring in Llama. Okay. And what's your take on the above, back and forth?
Does Llama remember the previous prompts the same way 3.5 does?
Yes. Yes. So one of the things we built into Boodlebox is they're all sharing context, but they all are keeping a separate sense of identity. That was not easy to do, by the way. So we have 3 AIs that realize they are 3 separate AIs, but they also have awareness of the conversation and the prompts here. So from an educational setting, I think this is interesting. I've talked to multiple computer science departments that are fascinated by this, being able to expose this to their students, the ability to understand the capabilities of different AIs and to bounce them off one another, right? And to use them this way. So, Troy, in our parlance, right, understanding the capabilities and limitations of your systems. And so I think one of the things that we should teach students is the ability to essentially interrogate and understand and the limitations of new AIs as they get exposed to them, because not all AIs are the same, right? And they all have different strengths and weaknesses. For example, all 3 of these AIs have a major limitation, which is they all have data cutoffs. So, ChatGPT famously only knew data up to, I think, like November of 2021 or something like that. Even 4.0 had a cutoff, somewhere in, 2023, I believe. Might be off on the date. But all these models, because they have intrinsic training data sets, they have a data cutoff. And if you ask anything past that point, now you're moving into hallucination territory, right? So if I asked Llama 3, who won the Army-Navy matchup last week, I'll be curious what it says. That's not nearly enough context. So it doesn't know what last week was, and it doesn't know the context. So is that a football game? Whatever. So that's where you should turn at this point to models or systems that have access to real-time information. And so what I just showed you are a bunch of what I call gen bots, so general assistants. The next category I want to introduce are web bots. So these are bots that have access to the internet. And you can see there's 3 here inside Boodlebox. There is a bot that uses the Bing web search API and uses Bing to pull information from the internet. There's another one similarly, this one uses the Google web search API, that's Web Google. And then I think a favorite of many people is WebBot Perplexity. So Perplexity is a pretty well-known large language model. It's actually a mixture of models, but it has access to the internet in real time. And so somebody once called a love child between ChatGPT and Google, not 100% accurate, maybe not even 50% accurate, but accurate in the sense of that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to do real-time research. And so if we bring in, let's go ahead and start with WebBot Bing and now ask it who won the last Army Navy game. So the bot now is accessing the internet, scraping data, and feeding that into a large language model to compile an answer. And so this is what we're actually seeing is a series of large language model interactions occurring. to produce this. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with WebBot Google. And then I'm going to do the same thing with Perplexity. Okay, you'll notice that Perplexity already provided an answer. And that's one of the advantages of Perplexity is they've already compiled a lot of this information into a form that the large language model can instantly access. So whereas Bing and Google are still doing web scraping, they're still pulling, for those who have used ChatGPT's internet research function, they're familiar with this. It could take a bit of time for the data to be scraped, whereas Perplexity is really, really fast, right? And it produces an answer pretty much right away. The other great thing about Perplexity as compared to using a large language model is it provides its sourcing. So if you click here on view source, here are the links that it went to develop this answer. So it pulled information from these 5 sources and then compiled the answer into a summary here. And so Perplexity is a fantastic model for real-time research of all types. I'm constantly surprised at how well it does. On the flip side, though, it does well until it doesn't do well. And I think that's true of kind of all these models. And so one of the challenges of using Perplexity is there are times when it will also not exactly hallucinate, but it just won't get the right answer. It'll misunderstand or it'll pull information from an irrelevant source. And so it's definitely not fire and forget in that sense. You still have to evaluate what comes out. But what's nice about it is by providing the sourcing, you can do the research yourself. So I'll stop there if you have anybody has any questions or comments about real-time research or the use of Perplexity.
Just a comment.
Actually,
I do like the sourcing bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to, this is a very basic question, I guess, Franz, and I need to go more into Bootlebox, but you were doing all this on the platform and you had the first 3 AI apps open and they were feeding onto each other. When you added the 4th one or the last one, does it follow up on the moment you add it up, or is it connected to the whole conversation throughout at Boodlebox? I mean, that's intriguing, just very basic question.
Oh, you mean when I added 3 prompts in a row all simultaneously?
Right. I mean, you open them up, or you open them up first, and you have them on the platform, and those are the ones you select.
Yeah. Oh, so okay. So just in Bootlebox, there are multiple ways to pull an AI assistant. So you can click on the icon here. It'll show you the basic kind of like core models. And
right.
when you click on one, that activates that model, then you're prompting that. You can see the model that's been selected.
Right.
You can, at any time, you can do @ and then type a keyword. And when you do that, it filters through the list of the 1,000 models that are in the bot and shows you a filtered list. And again, you can select a bot and now it's selected. The other thing you can do is deselect all the bots, and you can just type what you want to do. I want to draft. Sorry, my keyboard's acting up.
I can follow that, and I think
so then it makes a recommendation, right? Based on it's auto recommending based on what you type in,
right.
and then you can pick something as well. So did that answer your question?
Yeah. So it would immediately, the moment you pick a program to work with, it immediately understands the previous thread.
Yes. So when I introduce a new AI, in the same chat, it actually has the context of everything that's happened in the chat up to that date.
Got it. That was my question. I guess I didn't phrase it well at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I mean, you don't need to worry about at what point you introduce which app or which tool. They will have the context and the thread in the back. You don't need to upload upfront.
Correct.
Upload. Okay, good.
Yeah,
great.
that's one of the powers of this collaborative AI platform is the passing of context between different AIs. You can bring in a new AI and instantly is up to speed. It has the context of the whole conversation.
So then the skill is to know what to bring and what does what, and what I mean, it is that's the skill to learn then. Yes.
Yes. So one of the things I think a faculty should teach students, right, is much like we're doing today, what are the AIs out there? What are they good for? How do you, what do you use for what purposes? And then now, right, next level up, how do I combine AIs, right? In this case, I would use Perplexity to research the Army Navy game because it's got access to real-time information. And then maybe I bring in 4.0 and I ask it to, analyze the above and write a short blog post about the upcoming Army Navy game. Give it a second here. Okay, there's a game. And then maybe because I know Claude 3 has more nuance to it, I'm going to bring in Claude and say, rewrite the above to be pro-Army. And so now I'm layering on AIs that have different strengths and abilities to do a single task. And we call that bot stacking. And I think it's a really powerful way to use AIs. It allows you to solve problems that one single AI can't solve. Allows you to get better results. And frankly, to be more creative as well. And so there are things we're actually building in platform to enable bot stacking. Okay, the next, so we've been talking about text models up to date, up to this point. There are an extremely large number of image models out there. Probably the most well-known that kind of put this on the map was DALL-E. And then next up was Midjourney, which is a fantastic image generation platform, but it is a standalone platform. There are image generators that are available through API. Two of them are in Boodlebox. One is DALL-E 3, and the other one is Stable Diffusion, and their most recent version, Stable Diffusion XL. And so just going on the theme of passing context, let's go ahead and bring in Stable Diffusion here. So I'm going to deselect this bot. I'm going to go at SDXL, bring in Stable Diffusion, and say, create an image to go with the above. And so it's actually passing the context from this thread about the Army Navy game to the image bot, and it's going to go ahead and generate an image. Image bots have come a long way. In the early days, they were kind of nightmare fuel, right? 6 fingers, 2 heads, that sort of thing. They've gotten a lot better. Very patriotic, not exactly regulation uniforms, but we get the idea. There is an art to talking to image bots, just like there's an art to talking to large language models and prompting the right way. One of the things you can do is use AI to generate your prompts. So I'm going to go ahead and go back here and say, I'm going to use a bot that actually improves prompts and ask it, help me write a better image prompt for the above. So you can use AI to help you write better prompts to use with other AIs. And now we're starting to get a little meta, but I think this goes to a point I often make about AI. We don't have the muscle memory to work with this technology. Like we have got decades of, I put in a formula into Excel and it gives me a result. Or I put in 2 words into Google and I get a list of links and I open those links and I evaluate them, right? We are all immigrants in a sense to the world of generative AI. And so, the leveraging of these systems, like using AI to improve a prompt for another AI to use, of course it can be done. We just don't have the muscle memory to like do that, right? And so I think one of the challenges that faculty have with generative AI, and perhaps part of the apprehension of using it, is they themselves are not comfortable with the technology, right? They don't know all the things it can do. They don't know all the things it can't do. Maybe they're fearful of appearing, less than capable in front of their students. And the reality is all of us are trying to learn how to be comfortable with this technology. So you can see here, it's giving me, it's taking the prompt and it's refining the prompt and it's giving me a different prompt. So I'm going to go ahead and feed that prompt into ImageBot and see what result we get. Okay, we'll give that a moment. So there, many AI systems have bots that can help you use the system better. So in Boodlebox, you've got Prompt Bot, it'll help you rewrite prompts. You've got Help Bot, which you can ask it like, how do I do X? And it actually tells you how to use the AI systems, which is pretty meta, using AI to help teach you how to use AI. It's unlike any other technology I've experienced where people oftentimes ask me like, gosh, that's a little better. That's definitely very army. People often ask me, well, can generative AI do X? And honestly, a lot of times like, I don't know, let's try, right? And you have to go in and try it. And just because you can't do it doesn't necessarily mean the generative AI platform can't do it. It may be a matter of adding in additional information or prompting it a different way. So far we've talked about kind of what we call, foundational models or basic AIs, general AIs that generate certain things. We've talked about the web bots that can generate results from the internet, image bots that can generate images. We've talked about kind of these helper AIs that can help you use the AIs better. You may have heard of the term custom GPTs. So AIs are more powerful when you give them 3 things. And I joke, but it kind of makes sense. You give them a role, a soul, and a goal. So you give AIs, when you give AI a role, you can literally tell the AI, right? You are now a professor at the US Air Force Academy. You are now a sanitation engineer, right? You are now an Army Ranger, whatever. It will take on that role and the results will improve because instead of having to examine its entire knowledge base to come up with an answer, it can basically narrow the knowledge space that it's using to a smaller subset, and it knows the role it's supposed to take on, and so it will provide better responses, but also more tailored responses. Secondly, on the soul side, responses are better when you add in personalized information, like we mentioned earlier, when you incorporate knowledge into a conversation. There are 2 main ways to do that. One is you can just put things into context. whether you directly paste it or you put a web link in that gets scraped. The other way you can do it is attach a document through something called a vector database, embedding the document, and then pulling the relevant portions of the document out through a process called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. And what that does is it essentially adds a set of knowledge to the large language model that the large language model then accesses based on its relevance to a particular prompt. And it only pulls out pieces of that knowledge that are relevant and then attaches it to the prompt that goes over to the large language model to generate a result. In Boodlebox, all three knowledge augmentation techniques are available. You can paste something into a context window, including a very large one. You can put something, a web link in for web scraping, or you can attach a document to knowledge. And there's a little paperclip here that allows you to upload a document and add knowledge to a conversation. The goal portion of role, soul, and goal is when you tell the AI exactly what you want and what success looks like in the context, it will do a better job of generating the thing you want. And so these elements are kind of what people generally say is good prompt engineering, right? Telling the bot, this is your role, this is the context, this is who I am, this is what success looks like, and here's my question or here's your task. You will get better results if you give the AI that. Custom GPTs, which were first introduced in ChatGPT, made that process easy by packaging it all up into a convenient form, right? The custom GPT, which has a set of instructions that gave it a role and a goal, the ability to add additional knowledge to that particular assistant, that gives it the soul portion, and then be able to interact with that GPT. And a number of folks have built a lot of GPTs and put them out there. In Boodlebox, we have pre-built over 1,000 what we call AI helpers, which are our version of custom GPT. So if you go into the bot garage and you click it open, you can type in basically any term you want, and it'll show you the list of GPTs, our GPT equivalents, AI helpers that relate to that particular task. So you can see here, a bunch
For
of
some reason, the screen does, you cannot see the full screen.
Oh, sorry. Give me just a moment here.
Just the image is taken over.
Okay, sorry.
There you go.
There we go. So I just typed in the word letter, and you can see all of the AI helpers that relate to letters here. So, and so what's great about these bots is when you activate one, it does all those portions that I talked about. It gives it a set of instructions. It takes on that role. And here you can see, it introduces itself, and it's ready to take on a task. And in Boodlebox, these bots are designed to ask you a series of questions that go into a good prompt. And so a very common use case of these is pick a bot that does a task you want. So let me go ahead and find one. Let's do SWOT analysis. So here's a bot that does a SWOT analysis. So it's SWOT bot. So it will perform a SWOT analysis, and I can ask it to perform an analysis of the Xerox company. And the bot already has a role. It already knows what a SWOT analysis is. It has a set of instructions. And so now it's asking me some clarifying questions. Maybe I will say yes here. And so here it is doing, asking some more. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in perplexity. and say, provide answers to the above. And so you see I'm combining different bots here. And so one of the ways that people are using collaborative AI is stacking bots, a combination of different AI helpers, of different gen bots, of different research bots to accomplish a particular thing. And then at this point, bringing in other people. And so one of the capabilities of Boodlebox, if you click this button here, and I copy this link, I'm going to go ahead and put this in the chat. Anybody who can click that link can be in this chat and join in. And so we have the ability to have multiple AIs, multiple people, and multiple sources of information. So there are a number of other large language models being developed right now. So Troy mentioned Plato. When accuracy is important, you really need to create a model that has access to a vector database of information. So I strongly suspect Plato is using embedding and bringing in all these academic journal articles via vector database to reduce the amount of hallucination. There are models that are being developed with other areas of focus. Part of the challenge of specialty models is the general models just can increasingly get better and better. And so I think for many tasks, maybe the majority of tasks that people want to do, a general model does just fine. And once you give it a specific set of instructions, or in our case, you use an AI helper, it performs more than fine. It's pretty spot on. So we've got 3 minutes left. I'm going to stop there and see what questions or comments you all have. So I'll open it up.
Are these bots open source? Where are they being drawn from? Did you configure these? Where did they come from, I guess?
Yeah, the AI helpers, we configured them, and they're built on top of one of the other general models, Troy. So the default is actually Claude 3 Opus. Though for certain use cases, we will change the models. So there are times when, for example, if you added in a 1 million token document, it would switch over to Gemini 1.5 because that's what is required to. That's the only thing that has a context window big enough. So we, generally speaking, we created the instruction sets, configured the bots. We run them on a foundation model, generally speaking, Claude 3 Opus, but we will dynamically switch out the model if necessary based on the particular use case.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thanks. Oh, go ahead, Troy.
I was just going to say thanks. This is really helpful in terms of in one platform triangulating multiple voices of AI in a way that you can configure to the task at hand. I think that's really cool. So it's a pretty neat project you got.
Yeah, thanks, Troy.
I echo that. I'm still thinking how many ways I can apply this. It's great. Thanks, Franz.
Yeah, one of the things that's coming up next for us is we're going to be building the ability to create what we call bot stacks. So once you figure out a configuration of bots, a stack of bots you want to use, you may want to use them over and over again. So we're going to create the ability to save those. And so you can easily recall a stack of assistants, really a stack of commands. Command is an assistant with a prompt. Bring them back in a click, either run them all or run them step by step. And more importantly, share them. So if you create a great stack for, say, wow, here's a bot. I've uploaded the management department's course guide. Here's a set of instructions that allow me to produce a new syllabus. This works great. In one click, I can share that with other people. Or a professor could upload their course manual, give a set of instructions, and then share that particular bot basically becomes a custom GPT at the point, right? Hey, cadets or students, if you've got questions about, managing change, here is the bot that you need to use, and you can share that easily. So that's coming up. We'll talk more about that maybe in a future session. We're at the top of the hour. I invite you all to come back tomorrow. We have a great conversation with Dr. Denise Turley, and I believe Dr. Lance Cummings is going to join as well, about AI and academic integrity. How do we grade? What should we grade? Should we grade at all when it comes to AI? It's a fascinating discussion. I've had this pieces of it with other folks already, and I'm looking forward to a robust discussion tomorrow. If you can't make it, we will record it and make it available to everybody who's in the accelerator. So thanks for your time today. Thanks for everyone who's watching this asynchronously and joining us as part of the Accelerator's on-demand portion. And we look forward to having you join us at future sessions. Thanks, everyone.